Hello, welcome to my tutorial for the Cactus Grove bag pattern by Branda Bags. This is a wonderful bag full of curves and round shapes everywhere, and it's lovely to look at in all angles. You can add a strap to the bag like I have, or you can add a chain strap, entirely up to you. I do show how to make this strap. The tutorial comes with 2 zip pockets, one on the exterior and one on the interior. I like to do my zips slightly differently, so I have shown how to do the zip pocket the way the tutorial says, and I've shown how I make them, so you can choose which way to go. I've also added a slip pocket on the inside, and as you can see, I've done an embroidery design just to make a difference to the bag and make it unique. So without further ado, I shall get on with the tutorial. Enjoy watching. Okay, to begin with, we'll just go over the materials that we'll be using. And I've cut everything out and I've interfaced it. I've even interfaced my vinyl. This is very thin vinyl, so I just wanted to give it a bit of stability. So I've gone ahead and interfaced everything that I'm using. So this is my external panel pieces and my strap connectors. And I've done an embroidery design. This is by Creations by Cara. I will do a link to the design in the video description below, so do check that out. So I really like the design, so I'm happy with how it turned out. And we've got the reverse, the underside of the flap. I was going to do the flap in the lining, but I've decided to do some piping around the edge of the flap. So I've done plain black on both sides, and I'll have this lovely paint splosh effect to match the design all the way around. So I've measured a roughly 32-inch piece of piping cord, 4mm in thickness, and I've cut some 1-inch piece of fabric. And then of course we've got the side and bottom pieces. For my lining, the zip pockets I'm doing in plain black rather than wasting this lovely fabric on something that's going to be hidden all the time. So just plain black for the zip pockets. And then we've got this gorgeous fabric in the lining. And the side and bottom panel pieces. And the strap. I'm doing the strap on one side in the vinyl and the other side in this fabric. And you're bound to ask what fabric it is. So it's by Libs Elliott for Andover Fabrics. So year 2020. Pattern number 9753, and it's called Venom, as in snake venom. I bought this in black and the white background. I believe they had yellow and blue as well. I can't be sure, but anyway, they had a choice of colours. Hardware wise, I've got 2 zips, 9-inch long, in number 3 zips. And then I've got various things. I've got my slider for the strap, D-rings for the connectors, swivel clasps, the strap ends and the screws, the hardware hardware metal label, and the magnetic snap for closing the flap down. That's all the hardware. And also, instead of a strap, if you wanted to, you could add a metal chain. This is quite a long, narrowish one. The one Jutta has on her bag is a very chunky 18-inch strap. So it's entirely up to you what you use. And now I've got the magnetic snaps stuck to the chain. So that's all the hardware. Oh, and then we've got our foam, which is Pelon Flex Foam, which is a very thick foam. It's the thickest foam I know of. But I wanted to because the materials are very thin. And I've got my Decoville light for the flap. So that's it. Without further ado, I shall get on with the tutorial. So to begin with, we're going to start with the exterior main panel and adding a zipper pocket. Now the way that the pattern shows you is not how I like to do my pockets. So I'm going to put the pieces aside that I'm using, and I'm just going to show you how to make the pocket the pattern way so that you can choose how you do it. So I'm going to show you the way the pattern is on just some rough fabric that I don't think I'll ever use. I haven't interfaced it. This is for demo only, and the same with the zip. It's not a zip I'd use. And then I'm going to show you an alternative way that I like to do my zip. There's nothing wrong with this way at all. It's just how I prefer. So I'm showing you so that you've got the option of doing it this way, which is a nice way to do it, or doing it the alternate way. I think this is probably a bit easier, but it's just personal preference. So what I did first with all the pattern pieces, every single pattern piece, apart from the straps and the piping, I folded them in half, like so, and then I just snipped the bottom corner and then the top corner, just diagonally, so that then when we open it up, we've got some notches. And I've done this with the pocket pieces as well, everything. And that just marks the centre, which makes it easier to find. You can, if you prefer, use a heat dissolvable pen to mark them, or chalk, whatever your preference is. And what we need to do is get our pattern piece for the zipper pocket pieces, and we want to place one of the pocket pieces right side down, and we're just going to mark. I'm just looking for a pen that's the right colour to mark everything there. Oops. Using a heat dissolvable pen, I've cut out the box that showed. I instead of doing it on the fold, I like to print two pieces of the same pattern piece, stick them together, and then use it as a whole. So we draw the box that I've cut out of the pattern piece, like so. And then we get our panel piece, and we, using the notches to line up, we put them looking fairly centrally, top and bottom. And I've done it so that the curves are on the edge of here. So I'm happy with that where that is. And then we just pin it in place to stop it moving. And I'm going to take it to the machine and stitch all the way around on the lines. Okay, so I've stitched around the box, and I shall remove the pins. And the next thing we need to do is to cut along the centre. You can draw a line if you want to, if you're nervous about doing it freehand. And you don't go all the way to the end. Stop about 3/8 of an inch before the end, and then cut diagonally out to the corners, making sure you don't snip into the stitches, but go as far as you dare for a really neat end. So same with this end. I only went so far with the rotary cutter, and then I finished with my snipper. And again, out to the corners. As far as I dare go. So, this is how it looks now. And by the way, I should have actually clarified that the pattern pocket and the main panel are right sides together, as you can see. And now what we do is push this through to the back. It's a little bit difficult because I haven't used interfacing, and this is quite a thin cotton. It's a bit floppy, but this is why I've used it, because I'm not going to use this in sewing. So once we've pulled it through, we need to press neatly like so. And press the corners, and I'm just going to turn it over. You see you've got the little puckers in the corner there, so I want to make sure that we get rid of them if we can. Again, as I say, because this is like a poly cotton, it's very thin and doesn't behave like a quilted cotton, and I would never ever use this type of fabric on my bags. It's just too thin and just not good quality. So once we've done that, we'll give it a good press, and I'm not sure if I'm going to get rid of those puckers because of the nature of the fabric, but anyway, you get the gist. And now what we need to do is just get my double-sided tape, turn it over, and on the back place some tape along the edges of the opening. This is to temporarily stick the zip to the pocket opening. Okay, so we just peel off one layer for now, otherwise we get ourselves into a bit of a hot mess if we try to do two at the same time. And we get our zip and place it evenly along there. Now I just want to make sure that the zip pull is inside the opening, and then we pull the bottom piece of backing tape off. It's being awkward and doesn't want to come away from the tape, so it's pulling the tape off with it. That's it. And then we pull this down and make sure that it goes on evenly. Again, it is being a bit fiddly because of the nature of the fact that I've used cheap fabric and I've not interfaced, but this is going to go in the bin, so I didn't want to waste money. There we go, that's it. And now we need to sew all the way around the box to fix the zip in place. Okay, please excuse the really dreadful stitching, but this is purely because of the thin cotton and no interfacing, that it just hasn't behaved nicely. This is not how I normally stitch, believe me. If you watch my other videos, you'll see. Anyway, so that's the idea of it. Then we turn this over, and what we need to do next is place our remaining pocket piece face down over the first one. And then we need to stitch all the way around the outer edge to finish it off. So at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance as well. Okay, so there we have the pocket made. All the way around. Open it up, and there's it. I think that's a great pocket to make. I think it's lovely and easy. And so long as your stitching's not like mine, it'll look great. Like I say, it's a really good method and very easy, and I like it when pockets curve. Sometimes I do curve pockets, so you haven't got tiny corners to try and dig things out of, where dust tends to collect. So that's a lovely method to make the pocket. I hope I've demonstrated it well enough for you. Please don't stitch like me. And now next I'm going to show you how I like to do the zip pocket, and then I will leave it to you to decide which method you prefer to do. Now I'm going to show you the way I like to do my pockets. The first thing I did was I got a piece of vinyl and I measured it. And I believe this one in particular, it's normally 8 inches, but I don't know why I did this at 7.5 inches long and 1 3/8 inches deep. But like I said, I normally do them 8, so I don't know why I did this smaller. But anyway, once I've done that, I then cut a hole out. And basically what I do is I measure 1/2 inch up from the edge to 1/2 inch in from that edge and 1/2 inch. So this box is 6.5 inches long and 3/8 of an inch deep, and all these borders or edges measure 1/2 inch deep. I hope that makes sense. Now I'm going, I beg your pardon. And the other thing I do is, I don't know if you can see the difference here, but this one shows a white edge from the backing, and this one's got a black edge, and that's because I've painted it with leather paint, acrylic leather paint. I used a black one for this one, and I just edge painted it and then just wipe off any excess. It doesn't stain it at all. This is Angel Us, so it looks like, anyway, it's spelt with Angel Us. I got this from Amazon, and I also have it in navy blue. These are the colours I use the most of. But I've also got this Jacquard textile colour, which is a colourless extender. This it goes on white, so you can see where you're putting it. It dries clear, and I use this on all other colours. And what I do is I get a Sharpie pen, fabric permanent pen, and I colour the edges to match the vinyl I'm using, and then I go over it with this. So that's what I've done. So it shows as being black, and I've done it on the inside as well. I turn this upside down so I can line it up, so that I know that the pattern is straight. And you can see the notches, and there's a notch here for this line and the notch there, so that also tells me it's nice and straight. And I want to put this at the top of it 1.25 inches down from the top. I'm just getting my double-sided tape. This is my sewable double-sided tape. It's a German brand. From farbenmix.de site. I can't think of the actual name of it now, the brand. But I buy it from Bag, Kits and Glitzy Bits Facebook group and Foy. And if you ask her for the German 4mm wide double-sided tape, this is the one you'd get. It's around £8.50, thereabouts, depending on what Anne pays for it. That's depending on what she charges, but it's more or less that. So I was just lining that up again. I've also marked the centre of this with a white dot. And I make sure it's straight by checking the lines on my board that they're even. And place that nice and evenly as well. That went a bit wonky there. So I'm happy with where that is, and I'm going to take this to the machine and I'm going to stitch all the way around the outside of the facing. So I stitched all the way around the box, but what I did was I had the threads long to start with and I pulled them out to be long at the end, so that you're not double stitching backwards and forwards, because it doesn't always look so good on the top. And then I just pull the thread so that I can see the loop of the top thread, and I pull them through so that you've got that. It's a nice smooth stitching and there's no lumps and bumps. And then I just tie the threads off. Always tie 3 times, I don't know why, but I do. Okay, and now what we need to do is to cut the fabric in the centre. So I just cut along there, and then I get my Ginger double curve scissors, which I love. That's Ginghер. They're fantastic scissors. So we just trim to about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch away from the stitch line. Okay, so discard that, and there we have our little window box now. And we get our zip, and I need to use some more double-sided tape along the opening edge to stick the zip down. you have to be careful what double-sided tape you use. You have to make sure that it's sewable, otherwise you'll get a very gummed up needle and it's not very nice. Okay, so remove the backing off one side and lay it down over the zip. Like so. And then turn over and just remove the backing off the bottom. And there we go. And then we turn this back over and we get one of our pocket pieces and the double-sided tape and just lay some along the edge of the stitching on the bottom of the zip and at the top, like so. And we're just going to remove the bottom tape backing. And then we lay the pocket piece right side down with the straight edge and lay it like so. And then we take this to the machine and we just stitch along the bottom edge here. That's all we're doing. Okay, so again we've got these threads tailing off, so pull to get the loop through. And tie off. Okay, and then you can see what it looks like from the top. And then all we have to do is match this off. Now, as you can see, the bottom one is sticking out from the top. So all I do is, when it's nice and straight, it's not quite easy to do, but I just follow the line round of the top piece to get them to the same length. Like so. And take it to the machine and stitch a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around to close the pocket off. Okay, so I've just stitched along the bottom here, and then we just turn that over and do as we did before. By pulling this thread, we pull the loop from the top thread through, and then we just pull it through. Like so. And then we just tie these off. And then we fold this down and just finger press. That's all it needs. And then we take the top one off, and get our other piece, and just for ease of watching what I'm doing, I lay this, making sure the sides are even with the bottom pocket, and press there, take it to the machine and stitch up the side, along the top and down the side. So I've stitched all the way around the pocket, and once I did that I then realised that the pocket's longer than the panel because of the way we've done the pocket. So what we need to do is actually shorten the pockets, which is easily done. I'm just trying to find a pen to do it with. And I'm just going to mark where the panel comes to so I can see how much I need to shorten it by. And I really want to shorten it by 1/2 inch above the line. So as we come down, and it's just freehand because you're not going to see this. So it's perfectly alright to do. So literally like that. I'm going to I'm going to sew along this line and then trim the seam allowance. I shall come back and show you. So there I've stitched along there, and I'm literally just going to use my rotary cutter to trim the pocket to 1/4 inch seam allowance so that I'm going to be above the edge of the panel. So we've got a nice curve there, and you put your hand inside and it feels great. Still quite a nice deep pocket, but we've made it smaller to fit the panel. And when we stitch, we'll just make sure that stays out of the way whilst we stitch. So there you go, that's how I like to do my pockets. Now we're moving on to the flap. So we've got our 2 flap pieces and our Decoville light piece and our pattern piece for marking the magnetic snap. So we get the bottom piece, the piece that's underneath, and we put the pattern over there, and I've punched a hole in the centre like so, and I've just marked it on the pattern piece. And I'll get my washer, place it over the dot I've just made, mark the lines, and then I get my craft knife and just pop the holes through. And I have interfaced this with some Shapeflex SF101 interfacing. It's just the lightweight interfacing because the vinyl's thin. If you've got a padded vinyl, some of them are padded with felt, etc., then you don't need to worry. And we need to put, I believe, the male part of the snap. I'm just checking the yeah, I was just checking the pattern because obviously I haven't done this pattern yet either. I'm testing it as I go along. So we want the male part, which is the part with the little lump in the middle as such. And then some people push in, some people push out. I push out. And I'm not going to put any padding there because you'd feel it through the thinness of the flap. And the Decoville is going to cover that, so you're not going to feel it. So we don't need to worry about that. And now we put the flap right sides together. And we don't close the top, but we stitch all the way around the edge at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. If you're worried about doing the curves, you could mark a line all the way around so that you can follow that. Okay, so I've stitched all the way around the edge. You can probably see it better there. And I'm getting the Decoville light. Now, if I was doing this with fabric, I would turn this first, then add the Decoville, because this is quite stiff and it can make it difficult to turn. However, because it's vinyl, I can't press it from the outside, so I need to fix it as best I can now, and then probably just sort of slip the iron inside afterwards just to re-stick it in places if it's come undone. So I want to place it as fairly centrally as I can. Like so. And then just press. I haven't got my iron too hot because obviously I am pressing on vinyl. And this doesn't go all the way to the edges of the stitching. I've done it to the size of the pattern piece that we were given for the fusible interfacing and stabilizers, so it's not a mistake. It's meant to be smaller. Right, so this is probably as best I dare do it at the minute. And what we need to do, whilst that's cooling and drying, we just go round. I'm going to turn it over because I can see the edges of the stitching better. And we want to cut V-notches. Let's remove that. V-notches all the way round. Little triangles. This will help the seam sit nice and flat once we've turned. Okay, so that's the notches cut all the way round. And I just want to check that I haven't gone too close to the stitching anywhere before we turn it, because we don't want to turn it and then find that we accidentally trimmed or cut the stitching. No, I'm happy with all that. And now we turn it, and the Decoville light's not fully stuck, or even if it's stuck at all, but we just turn it right side out. Smooth it flat. And this is where I meant about popping the iron inside, being careful not to ruin the vinyl. And that's really as much as I dare iron the Decoville. And what we need to do now is trim around the edge. If you want to add a handmade label, now's the time to do it. So I haven't decided yet where I'm going to add it. I'm having a think, and I shall decide momentarily. But I'm going to top stitch all the way around the edge. So I've top stitched all the way around the edge. So that's the flap, and it's quite stiff with the Decoville Light, but not too stiff. And then we get the panel that we did the zip for, the zip pocket on, and we need to stitch this edge to this edge, which I know looks rather odd because this is almost straight and that isn't, but it will be okay. And we need to attach them with right sides together so that this is going to fold over from there. So we use the centre notches to line up, and we just have to coax the fabrics, and it's quite easy to do. And it's worth using quite a lot of clips. Just to fix it where you want it to fix. And then the same on this side. And then once we've clipped it all the way around, we then want to take it to the machine and attach it with 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So that's how it looks, and I'm going to go and stitch it, as I said, 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so I've stitched along the top here, 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. You can see it's not sitting flat, it's not meant to. When you open it up, you can see how it's going to sit nicely. So that's that, and we're going to return next with the attaching the panels, main panels, to the sides and bottom. Now we're going to join the back and front panels to the side and bottom pieces. But what I've done first is I've base stitched my foam to all the pieces with 5mm length stitching. I cut my foam to the size of the pattern pieces. I don't use the smaller pattern pieces. I don't ever fuse my foams. This is actually a non-fusible foam. It's Pellon Flex Foam, and it's quite thick, and it's sew-in only. The reason being is once I made a beautiful bag and very expensive materials, and I fused the foam to the fabric. When I turned the fabric through, it all puckered quite badly, and so I ironed it, and all it did was iron the creases even more. And it was awful, completely ruined the bag. So from that day I decided no more fusing foam. So I cut the same size pattern pieces, I base stitched it in, I do it with all the pieces, and then when I've joined the pieces together, I trim the foam out of the seam allowance to reduce bulk. And it comes out nicely because the base stitches are long, so that's not a problem. So that's what I do. The other thing I do when stitching curves, I have a little cheat, and that is my lovely stapler. This is a slightly different stapler to the normal type, and it's got the staple really close to the edge, so I can get it close to the edge and be very precise as to where I'm adding it. I love my little stapler, and you're probably thinking I've lost the plot, but it really is easy to use. I always make sure that the staples are within the seam allowance so that I don't stitch onto the staples. I don't want to break machine needles or damage my machine in any way. So when it's a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, it's dead easy to do. When it's 1/4 of an inch, it's a bit more difficult because there's not a lot of room to play with. But what I like to do is join the panels, make sure I'm happy with where they are, and use this to fix them in place to sew. And that's it really. So what I'm going to do now is get the pieces, and we want to start, we line up the notches that we made earlier and we put them right sides together. And I never staple to begin with. I always make sure that I'm happy with where I've got it with the clips, then I staple. The reason being is when you're sewing and you're removing the clips, the fabrics move and then you end up with a not very good seam. So this is why I do this. You don't have to, but I thought I'd show you. Okay, so I've started with the first clip, and what I'm going to do next is line the tops up. And this is because if we just go merrily adding clips, we'll end up with an excess. So you have to sort of ease the fabrics together. Oh, that wasn't very clever of me. Otherwise you'll end up with the fabrics like this. So we do that, and then we just make it fit basically. You just have to, what we call, ease the fabrics. You don't want it sort of puckering. Okay, so that's the panels joined with the clips, and I'm happy with that. So what I'll do now is go around with the stapler, and I shall come back and show you when I've stapled it. Okay, so I've stapled that in place all the way around, and as you can see they're quite close to the edge, so I'm not going to sew on them. And I've just remembered, I do apologise, and I'm quite disappointed, I forgot to add my piping. That's such a shame. It would have looked really nice, but these things happen. When you go off pattern and you're following the pattern, you tend to forget. I should have written it down. But yeah, so sadly, there's no piping on this. So I'll do it next time. So, back to where we are. I'm going to now stitch at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way round. And I will return and show you it. So that's it, stitched in place. And all I do now is quite simply remove the stitches, the staple, sorry. It's that easy. And you just have to make sure that you do remove all of them. And you can filter them, so I just scoot round at the end, feeling with my fingers to make sure that I haven't missed any stitches that might have buried themselves in the foam and hidden themselves. Like this one here. And we carry on round, removing them all, and then once I've done that, I then trim the foam out of the seam allowance by initially going in at the end, if it'll allow me to, and I trim close to the seam and then snip the stitches. And once you sort of snip the first lot of stitches where you've double stitched, it comes away quite easily. As you can see, you just cut the foam and pull away like so. And you just carry on round. So I'm going to remove all the staples, then I'm going to trim my foam out of the seam allowance and come back to show you. Right, so I've taken all of the foam out of the seam allowance and I've snipped all the way round. This will allow the bag to sit nicer, like that. So that's the seam there. Now it's entirely up to you whether you top stitch your bag. You can either top stitch on the front part or you can top stitch around this part. So I'm going to decide which way and top stitch, and then we do exactly the same with the part that's got the flap. We add this to this one, like so. And when I've done exactly the same with that as this one, I shall return to show you what we do next. Right, so I've done this one as well now. So both panels are done and they've been top stitched around. And now what we need to do is to join the two together. Now you could probably get away with sitting them inside each other, like so, because to do it like this would be really not so easy. So it's definitely better to sit one inside the other. Make sure, however, that the inside doesn't sit proud to the outside one. So you want to make sure. I'm just going to join these at the notches as well. And then do the same this side. And then we're going to stitch all the way round, again at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so I've stitched all the way round, and then I've taken the foam out of the seam allowance, and then I've snipped it everywhere, all the way along. And now we turn it right side out. Excuse me doing it off screen, but I have to bring it close to me a little bit. And there we have it. That looks good, doesn't it? That's very good. Okay, so next we need to make the connectors. I was going to use these lovely metal connectors that I have, but I decided to do the pattern as it's meant to be. So we've got these connectors. Just to remind myself, yeah, 6 inches long, 2 inches deep. Draw a line down the centre. And then get some double-sided tape. Okay, and then we remove the backing and fold into the centre. Now, this vinyl is really thin, and normally we'd cut this in half and use it for one each end, but because it's so thin, I'm actually going to fold this and I'm going to stitch the sides, and that's going to be my connector. I'm going to do that for each end, so I'm going to go and stitch that and do the other one and come back. Okay, so here we have the two connectors, which will fold in half like this. So I need to get my D-rings. And just to keep it in place, I'm just going to stitch across the bottom here, just to stop the connectors from sliding about. Okay, so I've stitched them across. We get our bag, and we need to mark 1 inch down from the top here. And I'm just going to get a bit of double-sided tape, place it along the top edge here, and then the fold here, the folded edge, we need to place on the white line that I've just marked. And we just need to hold them in place. Do the same this end. And then we take them to the machine and stitch across at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so I've added them on at each end, so they're secured in place. I did 2 rows of stitching just to really secure them. Then we bring the flap over, and we need to look at where the flap sits and the magnetic snap falls. So I just lifted it up at the snap and put a dot at the front. Then I measured, and by pure chance it's exactly in the centre. You can see the notch there, and it's 5.5 inches from that edge to there and to that edge, 5.5 inches each. So I'm happy with where that falls, and we just need to, I have a magnetic washer, glass washer, but it's gone, so I get another one. And we want to lay that over the dot, and I hope it will stay long enough to do that. And I get my craft knife, and keeping my hands well out of the way at the back. I've got my thumb here and my fingers there. I can assure you they are not near where I'm going through, because that would be crazy. Okay, and then we pop this in. Oh, there's the washer. I knew I had got it out. And then we place the washer over and bend the prongs in or out, whichever you prefer. And I am going to add just a little piece of foam over the top of that, so that you don't feel it when you're putting your hand into the lining side of the bag. So I use my Gutterman HT2 glue. That's my favourite. And press that on. And I'm going to leave that in place to dry before we continue with the next steps, which is making the lining, basically doing exactly what we've just done, but with the lining. Okay, so I got my lining pieces. I'm actually going to do something in addition to the pattern, and I'm going to add a slip pocket. So I've cut a piece of fabric, just remind myself, yeah, it's 10 inches long and 8 inches across. If you're using print fabric, directional print fabric, it needs to be 10 lengthways and 8 across of inches, of course. And I've interfaced it, and then we just fold it right sides together. I'm going to take it to my machine, and I'm going to stitch around the edges. I'm going to stitch down one edge and along, stop, give a couple of inches gap, probably 3, and then carry on stitching along and up. I'm doing 1/4 of an inch seam allowance down the sides, and I do 3/8 of an inch along the bottom, just to give a more generous amount to fold for the closure. Okay, so I've stitched around and left the gap, and I'm going to now trim the corners to give a neater finish. Okay, and then before I turn it through, I forgot to put my iron on, but I fold the seam back and press it so that it's ready for closing when we come to it. It just makes it easier than trying to do it. I mean, you don't have to iron it, you can finger press it, but that's all I've got to do. Like so, and then turn it through. And push the corners out with your fingers. Now I like quite a soft slip pocket. If you wanted a firmer pocket, you could have lined that inside with fleece just to give a bit of a stiffer pocket if you wanted to. Just going to press that a bit better, yeah. Right, so I use my little clover tracing pen as a tool to push out the corners. Like so. Just snip that thread that's poking out and give it a good press. And then all we need to do is just top stitch along the top. Okay, so I've top stitched along the top, and then I've just marked the centre. I just folded this in half, creased it and drew the lines to mark the centre of it. And I've got my panel piece, and I've got the notches that mark the centre of the panel as well. And I want to place the pocket 1.5 inches down from the top. And I've done the notch there, centre with this line. And that is exactly where I want it to be. And I'm going to take it to the machine and stitch down the side along the bottom, which will seal the bottom closed, and up the side. And at each start and end I will triple stitch just to secure the pocket firmly in place. Folded edge before we add it to our panel. So there we have the slip pocket in place, and it's probably just about the right nice size for this size panel. Now for the lining, I realised that I'm going to do the lining exactly the same way as we did the outer. So rather than spending the time filming it and having to edit the video, I'm going to ask you to go back to the beginning of the video and follow the steps for the outer to do the lining. The only difference being is that we don't have the flap to add. I shall come back when I've completed the lining panels and show you how to assemble the bag. I just remembered, thought I'd better pop back. Firstly, when you make the panel, when you join the side and bottom to the panel, you don't need to top stitch like we did for the outer panels. And secondly, when you join the two sections together, leave a gap of about 6 inches along the middle for turning. So that's it really. Otherwise, as you can see, it's just straightforward. So I shall come back when I've completed the rest of it. Right, so I've stitched the lining and I've left the hole at the bottom, and I've also pressed the seam so it'll be easier when I come to close it, especially with it be having a slight curve. And the side that has the zip pocket we want at the back, and we have this with the wrong sides out, and we get the exterior right sides out with the flap at the back, and we pop that into the hole. It will go, you just have to convince it that it's going to go. But once it's in there, it's in there. And the flap you have to sort of pass underneath so that it will allow you to match the sides up. It will even slightly poke out of the bottom like so. You can pull it out, which will help. Oops. And then we need to match everything up. So the first thing we want to do is match the seams up at the edges. We do both ends. And then we literally just go around and make sure, if you've done the foam the way I've done it, that you catch the foam in. You want to stitch the foam to the top to keep it sitting up so it doesn't collapse in, and and then you'll trim the seam allowance, the foam out of the seam allowance. So that side fitted nicely. Just pull it through again if it's sitting proud. And this one you have to convince a bit more that it wants to behave. And then I don't know how I'm going to do this because this isn't wide enough for my machine, so I'm probably going to have to stitch it like that with the needle inside. And we go take it to the machine and stitch 3/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way round. Okay, so I've stitched all the way around the top, and now we need to turn it through the opening at the bottom. quite an easy one to turn. And then just push it out. And then I like to go around and check everything looks right before we seal the opening closed. Make sure that it looks correct and that the stitching is good everywhere. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Oh, so what I'm going to do now is close this opening, and as I showed earlier, I had ironed the seam, so we don't have to worry about that because it's just going to come together nicely like that. So I'm going to take it to the machine and stitch this, and then I'm going to have a stab at top stitching this. I don't know if I can get it on my machine or not, but I'm hoping to. So we shall see. So I shall get those jobs done and return. Okay, well here she is. I've put a metal chain strap on her, which is good to use. But also, here she is. I couldn't top stitch. And basically I couldn't top stitch because these side connectors folded over is just too thick. Couldn't get it under my machine needle. But I actually don't think, I think we can get away without top stitching. It's quite happy to sit there like it is. Nice big open bag. And I'm going to make the shoulder strap for it now. In case you don't have a chain strap to use. And for that, we have these pieces. And I'm going to do one side in the black vinyl and one side in the cotton print. But I haven't got a piece that's long enough in the cotton print. So what I've got is two pieces, an extra piece to add on. And I shall join these together. I'm just trying to look to see if there's a continuation in the pattern. Yeah. Anyway, that's fine. And what we do is we get this piece at the bottom. That doesn't look squared off, so let's square that off. So I was drunk then. Must have forgotten to do that when I cut it out. So we get one piece horizontally and the other piece vertically, right sides together. And the top piece we place 1/4 of an inch overlapping on the top, and we have the bottom piece 1/4 of an inch coming out at the end. And you'll see why, if you haven't ever done this before, you'll see why we do it in a minute. And then we just grab a ruler and going from the corner points there and there, we draw a line that we're going to follow for the stitching. Oh, like so, from these corners. So I'm just going to stitch across there and show you what will be done next. So I've stitched across, and then we open this up. And had I not done this, we would have been opening it up like this. It wouldn't have been equal. So that's why we do the extra above, so that when we open it up, it's level. And I just want to trim that off and take it back to the machine, open the seam up, take it back to the machine and just top stitch either side of the seam that we've just stitched. So I've top stitched, I don't know if you can see that or not, and then we just trim off these pieces that are poking out at the top here and the bottom, just to level that off. So that's our piece, our strap, that's the same length as the vinyl piece. And what I'm going to do is draw a line now down the centre. I've already put some stabiliser, or interfacing, sorry, just along the centre, that's just under an inch wide, just to give us some strength in the part that's going to be laying flat. So we just keep drawing a line, and then I get my double-sided tape. You don't have to use double-sided tape, you can if you want. Just press it, iron it closed, but I just like to use my double-sided tape. Okay, so I just peel one of the tape backings off and fold it into the line. And try not to pull the fabric. If you pull it, it'll stretch it and it'll go quite out of shape, and you run the risk of the strap twisting. So just try to just fold it rather than pulling on it. There you go. And now we get my iron. And that's the first side made, and we do exactly the same with the vinyl side, only we don't press that one. So I shall do that and come back when that's finished. I've prepared the vinyl one, and I've laid a strip of double-sided tape along the centre, and to remove so much, I will get the other side and lay it on. I'm not pressing it down hard because I'm going to turn it over in a minute to make sure that it's laid evenly. Right, that's just a little bit long, but that doesn't matter. And what I've done is I wanted the cotton just to poke out slightly, like a little teaser to see, and that is only just happening, and that's great. There we go. So now we need to stitch down the sides to sew them together. Right, I've stitched the strap both sides, along both sides, so this turning it over, and now to construct it. And I just want to mention before I forget, I didn't add my handmade label because I didn't think it would look right with the embroidery design that I've done, and I didn't feel it would look right there either, so I forgot to mention why I wasn't adding it. So I just wanted to say, because I mentioned adding it at the beginning. Right, okay, so what we need to do now is decide which side the strap will be worn. Well, if we put it vinyl side down, it'll be very slippy off the shoulder. So I like to put, even though it's attractive, the cotton side down so that it tends to stay. In which case we put the clasp right side up like this. And then we get our slider and we pop that on. And it's up to you how far down you want to go. Now, I'm going to be adding a strap end, like so. And I like to attach these straps with rivets. So, bearing in mind I'm going to have a strap end on, I will mark the first hole when I can find my white pen. I'll mark the first hole for the rivet at 3/4 of an inch up from the edge and in the centre, and then 1/2 an inch up from that hole. And then I get my screw punch and I punch the first hole, and then the second one. And I tend to like to go over, I'll do this end as well, sorry, I want to do both ends at the same time. 3/4 and 1/2. I like to make sure that I've got plenty enough room to get my green machine down into the rivets, and that this isn't blocking it. You know, so it's no good putting it there like that because the hole's too close. So I tend to find going up by 3 inches is enough. Take that off a moment. Oh no, 4 inches, I do beg your pardon. So I measure a line 4 inches from the end and do it at both ends, because it will be the same with the swivel clasp. And And then I fold this over to meet the line. And then I mark for the holes. I never punch two holes, two layers at the same time, because that hasn't come through. Because you very often end up going skew whiffy on the back, and the holes come out not dead center, and it doesn't look good. Only I'm having trouble marking because of the colour of the print. It's not. Let's see if the navy blue helped. No, goodness me. What I'm going to do is just go through a little bit just to mark. Oh my goodness, this is proving to be very difficult. Okay, let's try red. I think because there's light and dark. Crikey. Oh my goodness, do you know why? The holes haven't gone all the way through, so I can't, it's not going to mark anything. Oh, it's Sunday morning. That's better. Let's see how we get on now, shall we? See, it's good to see that you're not the only one that makes mistakes. I make them all the time. That's better. Oh, okay. So, get my rivets. Excuse the noise of the car in the background, my next door neighbours. Right. Get our green machine and the rivets I'm using have 9mm caps and 8mm posts because my vinyl's not very thick. So that's that end done. I've added the swivel clasp and then I put this through. Like so. And then I'm going to make sure the holes have gone all the way through and mark to punch these holes. Put the clasp on. And then so there we have the strap made, and all we need to do now is to add the strap ends. And I just want to show you a little trick. If you just put these on and screw away, all it's going to do is the screws will squash the vinyl, but they won't actually pierce the vinyl. You do need to really put a hole, just a slight hole, to help the screw key into something, and then it will go into the fabric and it will fix on fully. So I just mark where the holes need to be, and then I don't go all the way through. I just sort of take off the top layer of fabric. Like so, you can see. And then I pop this on. I'm just going to get rid of that thread there that's sticking up. And then get my little screws out. And obviously make sure that you're putting this so that the screw side is facing into the fabric, so that you don't see the screws. No, that's not the right side. Oh. Right, well that's just turning that one. Even though they're new screws, that looks like that's been what you call graunched, where it's been attempted to be screwed and someone's turned too hard. I mean, that's come out of my new packet. Not very good. Okay, let's try a new screw. It's all trial and error. That's better. Oops. Okay, so you get the gist. I'm not going to keep on going because it'll just take forever. I'm going to finish the strap and then come back and show you in full glory with the strap attached. There we have the strap made and attached. And that's our bag done. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I look forward to seeing any bags that you make from this tutorial. Please subscribe underneath this video, and when you've pressed subscribe, press the bell to receive all notifications of any of my tutorials that get posted. That way you're kept up to date. And if you do post your bags, I'd be very grateful if you mention this tutorial and give a link. You can get the link by clicking share and copy link and then post it when you do, so that people can find it easily. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again soon.